Hello, everyone. Valerie Williams here with Converge with Us podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited for the next couple of podcasts. We're going to talk with members of our Converge team. So you're probably tired of hearing just from me, and Converge would not be Converge without the team behind the scenes. So I'm excited to share a few of our team members today. Today, specifically, we're going to talk with Bonnie and talk a little bit about the work we do with her and her consulting firm, Margins. So, Bonnie, why don't you say hello to everyone and tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Bonnie Oliva-Porter. I use she, her, ella pronouns. Ella is her in Spanish. And I run a firm called Margins. It's a workplace innovation studio. We are working with organizations and companies to help them design truly equitable and inclusive workplaces, and really focusing on their people functions, making sure that we're able to create employee experiences, design employee experiences that center the most marginalized people in the workforce. And so that can be anyone or anything, but wanting to make sure that when we design with and for the folks on the margins, we're able to really create something, create a culture that is inclusive and accessible to everyone.
Awesome. I love working with Bonnie because Bonnie has taught me so much about the HR function, the people function within organizations. And we work a lot with Bonnie and her team on our organizational assessments. So when we're kicking off, kind of helping an organization design a strategy, it's helpful for us to have a really thorough understanding of their current state. And one of those assessments that we run is our people practices assessment. So, Bonnie, can you talk a little bit about our org assessment process at Converge and how you and your team support us through that?
Yes, this is one of my favorite things, and it's part of the strategy creation process that Converge has, and we work in line with that. And it's part of the insight and discovery portion of that assessment process. So what we do is we work with the organization, the client, whoever they are, and look at a couple of different things. We look at their people function. So how was your people function worked out? What is the framework of that function? What do you have in place? Where do you want to be when your company grows, as your company scales? We also look at the employee experience. So thinking about what's it like for an individual from the moment they start at your company, from that onboarding process, throughout their growth and development in the organization, and ultimately, what does the separation look like? And we're looking at policies, processes, and procedures just to make sure that things are truly equitable. And we're also seeing if there's anything that we can highlight that could shift or could work differently or better. And some of the outcomes of this overall process are three things. So we're looking at what can we affirm? So what works really well in an organization already? As you're building your company, you're building your team, organically, there are things that come about that are great. And they're the reasons why people come to work at your company to begin with. And then we look at what needs action or attention. So what are things that are going on behind the scenes that, as your company evolves, that we may not know about as leaders, as we're thinking about growing a team and building a large company or scaling a company, or culture is still developing organically beneath the surface. So what are some things that need to bubble up to leadership that we must be aware about so that we can address those issues? And then ultimately, what do we want to achieve? So talking about that future state that we want to build and thinking about, making sure that we understand what it is that we're trying to, what our goals are, what we're trying to achieve, and how do we work backwards to make that happen as part of that strategy creation process.
Thank you. Yes, and we've done a numerous amount of assessment since we've started to work together. Like a year ago or so now?
Yeah, about a year and a half now.
A year and a half. That's right. And one of my favorite things that you've introduced me to is the GDEIB. A lot of our clients ask us about benchmarks and best practices, and you introduced this tool to me. So why don't you share a little bit about the GDEIB and how we use that tool, that best practice, if you will, in our org assessment process?
Yes, definitely. So the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Benchmarking Report is a report that's been built out with the support of about I think over 100 DEI experts and collaborators across the world. And it's made up of 275 benchmarks across 15 categories. And the way the report is structured, you can look at where your company may fall. You can give yourself like a self-assessment. It's on levels 1 through 5. So 1 being inactive, 5 being best practice. And the way we use it as part of this assessment is we actually work with our clients to have them take a portion of that self-assessment. So it's broken up into a couple of different categories and areas. And we look at that internal category. So that looks at employee engagement, it looks at retention, it looks at hiring practices, and it looks at work-life balance. And so we ask the client's employees to take a self-assessment to kind of rate where does that company fall. And then we do our own assessment of that based on our findings from our conversations with employees and our reviews of the policies, practices, and resources. And we kind of give folks we rate them on that scale of 1 to 5. And based on where they fall, we help them get to that 5 state. So that's part of that future state design session that we work on together. And we think about, based on those results that our employees gave us, how do we move to number 5? What do we need to do in each of those categories to get us to that best practice state?
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm curious of your journey to Margins. So Margins is Bonnie's consulting firm, her coaching practice. And I know that you've spent a lot of time in the startup world, really helping in-house and now externally helping organizations think through these people practices, these evolutions and changes and what's happening in the workplace. So I'm curious a little bit about your journey to where you are now, and maybe even it's Women's History Month. Talk to us a little bit about influential women in your life that has really played a major part in your journey today.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been quite the journey. I've taken a lot of different steps. And to start with an influential woman who really helped me get on this journey, I will talk about my Aunt Lizette. She started an organization in East Harlem back in like the 90s. I won't age myself, but she was serving individuals who had recently been released from prison, formerly incarcerated individuals, and helping them find work. So there was an employment agency where we were serving members of the community who needed this type of support. My first job was answering the phones at her agency. I remember being a teenager, coming in, answering the phones, scheduling appointments, meeting with clients, and those kinds of things. And that's really where my workforce journey began. From there, I went back to school. I graduated from college. I studied government. And I ended up working at the New York City Department of Small Business Services in workforce policy. And what I did there was help launch a workforce center in Hunts Point, which is an area of the Bronx that had the highest unemployment rate in New York City at the time. And I'm from the Bronx originally, so it was really exciting for me to be able to go back and work in the Bronx and help folks out. And that was a workforce center that served thousands of people across New York City. From there, I also worked on a number of grant programs during the financial recession of 2008 to support community-based organizations that were training and placing folks from the most marginalized communities in New York City. So talking about folks who were veterans, folks who had a GED or less than that in education experience, folks who may have been laid off and throughout that recession period, folks with criminal backgrounds and things like that. And I really started looking at how these organizations functioned. What do we need to do to make sure that our clients and the folks that we place in organizations can thrive in the jobs that they end up getting, not just placing them in a job to say we made a number or mark or success, but to be able to say we can help someone with their career trajectory from this point on. My mother also worked with my Aunt Lizette. They worked together at an organization called Strive. So my mother happens to be one of the most influential women. As somebody who was an immigrant to the United States, came here and raised my sister and I was always supported so many different people, and always made me feel like anything is possible and that you can do a lot of different things and juggle a lot of different things. And as long as you're excited about what you're doing, you can go very, very far. I remember her, as I was growing up, going to school and working full time and really being passionate about the people she served. in her job, as well as raising her family and taking care of her family. And I, see that now when she helps me with my toddler when I need that support. And so she has definitely been a very influential woman in my life. And I will always thank her for all that she's shown, all the support that she's given me as well.
I love that. I love that. And you're taking that into your own motherhood journey as well, with your son. And we love that Trey gets to be a part of our team meetings as well. So,
and I know you asked about my startup journey. So I have a very long journey. So I take a pause there, but my next stage after the government work was I went to work in startups, worked at a couple of different ones, but the one that I worked at the longest was a fintech startup called Tala, which serves folks in emerging markets credit scoring and lending via a mobile product. And I was there from inception in our founder's head to about 10 years later when we were in 5 countries across the globe. We had over 500 employees, and I was there to help build out our people function and open our offices in different parts around the world. And that is really where I got into the very specific focuses around HR, payroll and benefits and perks and compensation philosophies and performance management structures and all of those things. I was able to bring all of these experiences together to build a function that we really wanted to focus on equity. As we were growing our company, we noticed at one point that we needed to be really intentional about diversity, equity, and inclusion. As you're building a scaling tech startup, if you're not intentional about it, it can get away from you. So we wanted to make sure that was always a part of our company and our journey. And I was really excited to help build that out. And after that, I decided I wanted to consult and take my skills and talents to a couple of different organizations. So that's what I've been doing since.
I love that. I love that. And I particularly love your experience for so many reasons, but I mean, you were on a women-led, a woman founder team at Tala for the longest. And you still have to think about diversity. I think people think that, if you have a diverse team, quote unquote, that you can just, not really have a DEI program, but you still have to be intentional as you scale, as you grow, to really keep that top of mind. So appreciate that. All right. Well, any final words, anything you want to, leave with our leaders, our HR folks, our C-suite folks, any final words on equity? I know that's your big thing. So
I think one exercise that we do often, one that I learned along my journey, is this exercise around thinking about when you look at your company, what are the characteristics of the folks on the mainstream? What are the characteristics of the folks on the margins? And then what are the voices that are missing from the conversations that you're having in the workplace every day? And this is something that really helps us understand what we need to focus on in companies and in organizations. And this is where those margins can be really important. So when we design for those margins, as I said before, we really are able to serve everyone. We want to make sure that our practices and processes are truly, truly accessible. And we don't know what that looks like unless we're asking those questions and figuring out which voices are not in the room and finding ways to amplify those voices as much as possible. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as you're building a company and a team, to make sure that you are reaching as many people as possible.
Love that, Bonnie. Love that. How can people learn more about Margins? Where should they go?
Yes, so you can check us out at www.margins.studio, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Margins Studio.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Bonnie, for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast, please do so. Definitely check us out on social media. We're going to be featuring more of our Converge team. As you see, we have a team of just super strong practitioners and coaches and consultants that we're like special ops. So we just come in whenever we need those specialists. So again, thanks to Bonnie, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye.